Hello and welcome to video 3 of this series on teaching historical concepts. If you haven't watched video 1 and 2 on historical inquiry and evidence, please watch them before, as this one directly built on them. From this point on, there is no set order to view them in, so watch those relevant to what you are teaching. Today the focus is on continuity and change. We'll be focusing on the same 3 questions as before, with the aim of having a deeper understanding of this concept and thinking about the role it plays in the primary history classroom. This video series acts as an introduction to a much deeper conversation. What is a second order concept? The first thing we do when teaching history is study the relevant source material to gain the knowledge relevant to the inquiry question at hand. The first order concepts, therefore, are those related to knowledge, such as trade, monarchy, etc. Once we have gained that knowledge, we use concepts such as continuity and change to interpret it as a historian might. They are the second thing we do after gaining the knowledge. Before we start, these are important things to ensure are in place. First, inquiry questions are key to provide clarity of purpose, and within them they will contain that core second order concept that drives the interpretation and analysis. To ensure it's manageable, they are broken into sub-questions that lead either individual lessons or a couple of lessons. The core knowledge is defined in advance of the lesson, so the endpoint is clear, and sources of evidence are studied to find the relevant evidence that is then interpreted. Without these 4 precursors, it's very difficult to accomplish what we are aiming for. Where could it feature within the curriculum? The content on screen is a blend of statutory units alongside others which are often taught. They may be the focus for an entire unit of work or a smaller sub-question within one. However it's encountered, children must have the relevant knowledge to hand in order to drive the analysis and interpretation. History has the word story in it. When we are studying continuities and changes over a given duration, it's important to think about which aspects are being focused on. This is the framing for the narrative arc and the emphasis from which core knowledge is derived. The teacher needs to clarify the relevant background in each lesson, as it is quite possible that children will be working through different time periods, especially across Key Stage 2. So what is continuity and change? From the recent Ofsted Research Review series, change in continuity relates to historical analysis of the pace, nature and extent of change, or characterization of a process of change. My preferred metaphor when I'm thinking about this is a stone skimming across a pond, because in effect that's what we're doing. In history we are focusing on how something changes as we drop in on different points throughout human history. What role does it play in lessons? When teaching about change, quite often it will require several lessons to acquire sufficient depth and breadth of knowledge. As such, change may appear as a concept near the end of the sequence. If this is the case, ensure children are able to make the important connection between the overall inquiry question into knowledge, into eventual answer. Even when continuity and change are the subject for a sub-question, it will still require an amount of teaching time to acquire that breadth of knowledge. Timelines as a graphic organiser. The earliest exposures in school will arise in EYFS as part of understanding the world. These may focus on seasonal change or how children have changed from birth to now, but introduce them to the linear nature of time and changes happening across different time spans. This is the base level from which Key Stage 1 and 2 can build. Whilst not always historical, it introduces the concept clearly alongside sequential order. Into Key Stage 1, children will encounter changes within living memory. The timescale has increased to approximately a century or beyond if schools wish, but the underlying principle of sequential order is still key throughout. Depending on the nature of which changes are studied, additional complexity can be added, such as the toys example. The teddy bear was first invented beyond living memory, and the core idea behind them is still very similar today, therefore a continuity over time. The development of games consoles, however, is very different. There have been huge changes across a much shorter time frame. So, don't think of change as a direct linear path, as it often isn't. The rate of change varies hugely. Expanding the breadth into Key Stage 2. Once again, the scale of the study dramatically increases in Key Stage 2. Whilst the timeline looks as though it covers the same time frame, this is not the case. The children may be asked to study changes within a period or across several of them. However, the concept of change retains the same function in different contexts. Let's take a look at two examples. In example 1, we are teaching about changes in Britain from the Stone Age to Iron Age. It's important to remember that these changes need to be placed within the wider story of that period. For example, merely focusing on homes in isolation shows some change, but it could be much harder to link the transition to permanent settlement without the children knowing that agriculture progressively replaced hunter-gathering as the main source of food for people. The changes are linked. When thinking about changes within a period of time, such as the changes in Egyptian burial practice, subdividing the narrative into kingdoms highlights that even though we may call it the ancient Egyptian period, it is further divided. This allows children to think about when changes took place with more precision. Therefore, instead of saying Egyptians buried pharaohs in pyramids and then the Valley of the Kings, children could be more precise by naming specifically when these changes started to take effect. We may think about these questions to consider change in different ways. They're not always relevant or answerable, but so much more is available to children than just what has changed. Linking across the curriculum. Children learn these concepts through repeated, meaningful encounters in different contexts. Each time it features, the understanding and application can be developed in line with the curriculum content. First exposures are going to be more instructive because it's brand new. The children's responses can be scaffolded and guided as needed. On the next occasion, the meaning can be reminded or retrieved alongside where the children have encountered it. This allows attention to move onto the new context with appropriate scaffolding. As children become more fluent, the scaffolding and instruction can be targeted to the new context and withdrawn as appropriate. The summary. Regardless of which concept we are focusing in on, the inquiry question is key because it allows us to focus in on which part of the story matters, be that continuity and change or another concept. It's very difficult to gain the scope of a change without the appropriate background knowledge. Therefore, always remember what Christian Council said, that in history, the hinterland is as important as the core. Once again, regardless of which concept we're focusing on, we need to be very mindful of that central relationship between inquiry question, sub-question, knowledge, and eventual answer. Given that we are taking children into abstract worlds and dropping in on various worlds in this particular example, the teacher's role is key to narrate the knowledge in order to clarify which bits are key for our purposes in the curriculum and which bits allow that to make sense within the wider story. So, I hope you've enjoyed and found this video useful. It would be great if you could give it a like and subscribe to the channel. As you can see on the screen, I've currently done these two videos, and I'll be working my way through the others. Thanks very much. Bye.